Every week that passes, we get some news that is troubling, irritating, reignites frustration and anxiety as COVID, which is now endemic in almost all parts of the world, including India, peaks and troughs. So once again, the COVID cases in India are rising. It's flu season. Once again, there are a few deaths being reported. Now, we will have to accept what an endemic disease means. It's going to be with us forever. We don't have a cent% preventive vaccine like we do for polio and other things. But as the peaks and troughs happen, it is face palming, wrist slapping, mind numbing how a humanity, a global conglomeration, has been found totally vacuous, impotent, and ineffectual in just answering a basic question: how did this start and how do we prevent it next time? So we are now saying that millions of people, to the tune of a world war, to the tune of the Holocaust, have died, and we are going to let the Chinese Communist Party get away with an abject cover-up. Believe it or not, they have had the gall and gumption now to write the history on COVID. They want it clear that the history should record that there were some animals that were carrying this virus, and it emerged from an animal wet market a stone's throw from a lab that we all know was doing research on these matters. Now, no force, agency, government in the world, for some reason, has had the gumption to go on official record and counter this blatant, hypocritical lie. How can we trust the Chinese to give themselves a self-assessment on a biohazard facility that they were running, which has killed so many people? How can we? If the science has to be proven, then absolute transparency has to be shown. But the Chinese are saying, no, this is what happened, take it or leave it. It's scary. It's mind-numbing. Now, in the course of the past 3 or 4 years, we've seen the WHO wiggle and sigh. We've seen the Chinese not only steal data, seal off all their access, all their whistleblowers are either missing, dead, or vanished. The people who were at the front line of telling us what was going on in Wuhan at the very beginning, all gone. The people who were doing the research in the labs have got awards by the Chinese Communist Party, believe it or not. How is this still happening? It's a farce going on the face of the planet, and all I have to offer to you is impotent rage, it's called. Let's open up this conversation on this latest effort by the Chinese to whitewash, and just make a note for history. So 70 years later, 80 years later, different generations are told a different story of what actually happened. We won't let them. Democracies, free countries in the world should not let them. For the benefit of the people of China, India, America, Europe, and of humanity. We can't let them get away with it. So we are at least here going to try to not let them get away with it. Dr. PSV Rao is joining us on the broadcast. Dr. Ishwar Gulati is with us. Dr. Sanjeev Bagai is with us, and Gautam Mukherjee joining us on the broadcast. Dr. Rao, what do you make of this now report by the Chinese, which is trying to draw the line under the origination of COVID? Do we trust it?
Absolutely no. They have again trying to say that some swabs and some that they took from the wet market has shown that there were animals there which could get infected by this, and at least they have said that it could be the humans who would have infected the animals, or the animals could have. They are just trying to confuse the whole issue. See, if you can't convince the world, then confuse the world. And they have the Americans on their side, because the Americans are also involved in it. So it will eventually have to be some other government which puts his foot down and says there is enough evidence that it is. See, number one, I had put out in one of my early articles a survey done by the Chinese around the time the pandemic started, which showed that the suspect animals were not being sold in the Wuhan wet market. These animals, like the bats and pangolins, were being sold in the southern part of China, but not in Wuhan. And this is a scientifically published article which now the Chinese can't suppress. Second, the Lancet article published by the doctors practicing in Wuhan, who had identified all the early cases which were admitted in December and were proved to be having COVID-19. And none of the initial few cases, they had asked these people the question, have you been to the Wuhan wet market? And the answer was negative for the initial cases. So, third, the cleavage, the furin cleavage side. Now, it is accepted by all the uncompromised virologists that this could not have come into the coronavirus, because none of the other
Dr. Rao, we've had these conversations before, sir.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask you a very straightforward question, because it's not just the Chinese, from the CDC in America to Fauci, not one person, to the WHO, not one person has even lost their job, not one person has even seen a reprimand, not one person has even seen some inquisition other than some congressional questioning which has happened in the US. So now, as history will record 30, 40, 50, 60 years from now, when you and I are no longer here to have these conversations, history will record that we had no idea, most likely animal origin, and there was no biosafety, nothing that took place. That's the historical record. Have we just witnessed then, Dr. Rao, the greatest cover-up in world history?
Yes, it is one of the greatest cover-ups, but mind you, all these cover-ups will eventually get exposed. It's only a question of time. You can't suppress truth forever. Neither the Communist Party will last forever, nor the perpetrators of this will last forever. Agreed, we may or may not be there, but eventually the truth will be out, and there is already.
No, we are a country of satyagraha. We believe in that, but in the end, we still don't know, who killed JFK. There are many global mysteries, sir, in which the answers never come out.
Yeah, we have got Subhash Chandra Bose's death also.
Yeah, so some answers never come out. Trust me, all the details are in a file somewhere. But we don't know, and because we are not being told for obvious reasons. So let me ask the same question to Dr. Bagai. Dr. Bagai, now we know what's going on. Now, an attempt is being made to write the history books on these matters. And it is a very dangerous attempt, because like I said, there will be a time in decades to come when all the witnesses will be dead. You and I will no longer be here. And some researcher will have to go back and say what happened, and they will say, okay, the final culmination was that it was an accident or it happened from natural relations, and oops. Have we witnessed then the greatest cover-up in our lifetime, sir?
Good afternoon, Rishabh. Good afternoon, everyone. I think we've just seen an unfolding of perhaps the largest global fraud. It's a humanitarian crisis of international magnitude, a complete farce. We know that China are serial offenders. Their greatest victory is in lying. I partly agree and partly disagree with my previous speaker, because even if there was evidence which was there, you're not going to find it. And history is as good as how it is written. The fact is that the evidence has been eliminated, it has been erased, it has been fudged. The data, we have none from China, including the vaccine data. And now the new sublineages of Omicron, which have crossed more than 1100 sublineages, have taken the world very far away from the Alpha and Delta wave. Unfortunately, the major countries have not stood as a collaborative effort together. I know that US, in terms of few people, were involved in the research there. Now, whether it came from the wet market or it was a lab leak, the fact is that it's a man-made disaster with magnitudes which have destroyed the world. China has to be held accountable, both financially, morally, medically, and they have to be isolated and pinned down. And I must say, at some point of time, India and perhaps countries like China, who have Japan, who have very high moral integrity and a spine, are going to stand up for it. Over to you.
Okay. Dr. Gilada, my same question. Like I said, there will be a time, sir, that all of us who were the witnesses to what happened, where our experiential human testimony exists, eventually will fade away. And an official history will have to be written. And an attempt is being made to write an official history very carefully to, as we were just told, to fudge and confuse the issue so the truth can be buried forever. Are we witnessing, are we living the greatest cover-up, at least in our lifetimes, if not in human history?
Rishabh, I will blame WHO as much as I will blame China. WHO started Committee 1, Committee 2, Committee 3, Committee 4. Currently, it is a fact-finding mission 4. Why WHO has to wait for 3 years and again say on World Health Day, just a photo opportunity to saying that virus has come, there are two theories. One of the theories that it has come from somewhere, one of the theories which has come from Wuhan. Now, show me one person, barring China and WHO chief, who says that there are two theories. There's only one theory. So that is one thing. Secondly, we are all individually, socially, nationally and internationally, we are boneless creature. We know that China has done this, despite that China is entertained everywhere. We go to market, we buy something, we find something cheaper from China, we buy it because we think that we are saving money. Nationally also, there is no total embargo on China, there is no boycotting of China anywhere. So if we, all of us know that it has come from China, it has destroyed the world, as Dr. Bagai said, why we side for any reason to China? And why there has to be two parties? There should be only one unanimity. So I think WHO has been held responsible.
But Dr. Gilada, how is it, okay, now under two US presidents, that the chief of the WHO has had to face not even an inquiry into his actions? He has been retained and restored in his job. Forget inquiry against the Chinese. There was a US congressional inquiry of which the data was never released to us. To the best part of me, Anthony Fauci has faced some grilling in the US Congress, but he has shown the finger to everyone, and he is faced, it's not like his comfortable retirement and pension is under threat or his job has been lost. No one has been held to answer for 6.8 million people, including friends and family of you and I, who are now dead. Dr. Gilada.
Yeah, nobody is held. Responsible, and WHO chief is supposed to be squarely blamed. he has been always siding China. Now at least he's talking neutral, but it doesn't matter. After 3 years, he is trying to be neutral. And again, he is not neutral. He always talks about two theories. And when there is only one theory, that the virus emerged from Wuhan, it is a man-made disaster, it has been designed, and somehow it has exploded either time-wise or before time, we don't know. And even so today, that has happened, either by design or by some kind of mishap. Nobody is going to hang China. So, but they don't come out, and WHO doesn't say anything. And all of us, we continue to honor WHO. WHO has no credence in whole of America. It has no credence in whole of Europe. Only Africa and Asia give some credence to WHO. And even that credibility WHO is losing day by day by siding to China.
Okay. Gautam Mukherjee, in the past few months, there have been reports out of Central Asia, out of Africa, which are very quick to say that certain deaths of children which have been reported have been specifically caused by cough syrup, which is being produced in India. They're very clear. There's no investigation, inquiry, going into the factory, finding out. It's very clear that this Indian cough syrup is killing children. Now, but when it comes to 6.8 million people dead, including, like I said, friends and family of you and me, we are very vague on what went wrong. Why?
Well, right from the beginning, the matter of proof was denied. No attempt was allowed to go into Wuhan and obtain proof of whether it happened because of this or it happened because of that. Lot of Chinese data is fudged. How many people were infected? How many people died? And so on. What was lockdown? What was the cause? And so forth. Now, as long as it sort of stays in the realm of theory from the word go, it won't be long before it moves on to myth, from theory to myth. Now, why is this? It is because China is strutting the world stage in multiple fronts, cocking a snook at the whole world, whether it is aggression on its borders, whether it is rewriting the maritime laws, whether it is trade fraud, whether it is aggressive imperialistic behavior with small countries. It's been doing this simultaneously all across the world, and various countries are beholden to it for various reasons. Some are in debt, some have trade ties which are too difficult for them to untie, some are afraid of them militarily, and so it goes on. So it's only and only when China is reduced in its economics, in its military sense, and its diplomacy, which may happen as the time goes on.
So, Gautam Mukherjee, here's the problem. Now, I am not scared of an endemic disease because I have to learn to live and accept it. You and I are living to accept it that yes, every time the flu season comes, there will be certain spikes in COVID-related cases, and a minuscule percentage of those infected will lose their lives. Okay, we are at 11 and counting yesterday. Okay, so we've come to accept. What I am genuinely afraid about is that the Chinese now feel, hey, right, this works. Now, the only error we made was that this originated in Wuhan. If it could conveniently originate elsewhere through not very complicated logistical means, every time we want to create a global crisis, not much effort is required. It's called biological warfare. Now, have we just, by not taking accountability, confirmed that you can potentially in the future conduct biological warfare without any accountability?
Well, if China is left unchecked, as I said, on all fronts, whether it's military, diplomacy, or trade, or investment, then they are every day expanding their scope of works, putting pressure on all the nations of the world, advancing their particular objectives, pushing their ideology in terms of justification. And so, yes, if biological warfare, which has been, if you like, as if one is advancing a theory, why not advance that this also is deliberate biological warfare?
Who knows? Now, at this point of time, who knows? But my biggest fear is if you can't take accountability to tell the truth of what took place, and you just sit and watch the cover-up happen, the next time people will go, hey, last time around it wasn't too difficult and we crossed global chaos. Who knows, we can do it again. Let me get Dr. Bagai here. Dr. Bagai, then are we now to just draw an assumption and a presumption? That's all I can offer to our viewers. That the Chinese Wuhan lab was doing research on exactly these kind of viruses. Most likely this was an unintentional lab leak, because if they wanted it to be intentional, the point of origin would have been outside the Chinese border. So an unintentional lab leak. The reason the Americans have been deathly silent on this is because their own people at the highest levels were involved in this research, so their hands are not clean either. And these are the only two parties who actually know what happened, and therefore it's mutual convenience not to out the other.
Absolutely. I think what we don't know, we'll never know. And as time passes by, month after month, the evidence is going to get so faded in our mind and memories that the world will just walk on. And that's the most unfortunate thing. So I think in a background of serial offenders and criminal acts of China, this has been a cherry on the cake as far as their performance is concerned. They never fail the world to embarrass themselves, but they feel that they are conquering the world. Going forward, I think, this entire episode of COVID and SARS-CoV-2 and now this Omicron XBB 1.16, it's still not over. And it's extremely unfortunate that presumably at the fag end of COVID entering now the fourth year, people are still dying. Every human life is valuable. People say it is mild, it's no longer mild, it is still highly affecting the vulnerable. I think the world has to get together, and the lead is not going to come from US or Canada or indeed UK. It's going to come from certain good, strong powers from the Southeast Asian countries, like I mentioned, Japan, India is for an example, Australia, people who have the courage for standing up for what is correct. I think China can be hit really hard socially and economically, and that will bring them down.
Okay, at least one can hope. Okay, so now, Dr. Rao, the crime scene has been cleaned up and sanitized. The eyewitnesses have been either co-opted or they've simply vanished from this planet. They no longer exist. All the whistleblowers, original whistleblowers, are all dead or missing. The investigation is not happening. There is no investigation happening in China. The global investigation is, you and I both know, is a farce. There is now motivation potentially for a cover-up by the two parties in America and in China who actually had an idea what was going on in this lab. So there is motivation to cover up. The crime scene has been cleaned up. The witnesses are now gone. Now you and I and others are left, sir. What can we do?
I think what we can do has already been mentioned by some of my co-panelists. We need to hit China in every way we can. And for that, many of us who have suffered at the hands of this duplicate of biowarfare, that is China financed by US and now being suppressed by both the nations. I think the rest of us who have suffered have to get together, and now that we have sort of got out of the real main part of the pandemic, we are doing relatively well. Our economies are sort of surviving and recovering. We need to financially hit China. That is what will really hurt them. We have to focus on that, and I think India should take a lead in this. Yeah, of course, like it has been mentioned, nations like Japan, Australia, help could also be taken in this. Australia has already been hitting
Dr.
them
Rao,
hard.
I'm going to ask you the very difficult question. It's a difficult question because this is the only thing that still scares me. It's the what you know you can still deal with. What you don't know, what is stopping, or what could potentially stop the Chinese from sending a handful of couriers with a couple of vials in them, shipping them to India, where some obscure person opens the vial, a few days later starts sneezing. What is stopping them from doing this?
Nothing is stopping them. And they have already collected Ebola and other viruses from bats in Nagaland without Indian government permission. They have collected such viruses from other parts of the world. They have stolen viruses from the Canadian virus lab. They can send any of these things. It is very easy. And like I had mentioned in one of my articles, there are already published scientific methods of preserving these viruses, because traditionally these viruses don't survive outside the human or the animal body. But these methods have been developed where this can be made into a powder form. These are, especially the coronavirus and influenza virus, are airborne viruses. All you need is some dust on a packet where you open it, the dust spreads out and the infection starts out. And this can be posted to you by any trade route. This
Okay,
is
so-
exactly
so I
this is
can-
another reason we should stop trading
Yeah,
with
so
China.
okay, so when they come to Galwan with sticks and stones, I can stand in front of them. When they bring the tanks and the aircraft, we can stand in front of them. When they load up their missiles, we can create an anti-missile shield. We can do certain things. How do you fight this? Dr. Gulati, what is stopping the Chinese from weaponizing this in the future?
China has done this. Wuhan has been their lab, biological warfare. They probably wanted the whole world to be affected except China. Somehow China itself got engulfed into it, and they can always do that as a biological warfare. The only thing the rest of the world can do is, number one, economic blockade, number two, social blockade, number three, unilaterally declared that China has created this warfare, and unless and until China comes out clean by way of evidence, the whole world says that China has done it. Then other way around, saying that we are sending our fact-finding mission, and then saying that they are not cooperating. And the NIH has funded that lab. Probably they may not have known the sinister design of China, and they must have hidden that sinister design also. So even NIH is held also responsible, to be held responsible, and WHO should be held responsible. So I think all these three agencies, they are importantly held responsible, and all of us should have a economic and social blockade to China.
Okay.
Nothing else we can do.
Okay, I'm going to leave the last thought with Gautam Mukherjee. Now, Gautam Mukherjee, this can play out two ways. Okay, the Chinese can actually be aghast and deeply troubled and very wary of the internal deaths. I mean, you can cover up how many numbers, but eventually the people on the ground who lost friends and family know, right? People have died and the lockdowns have happened. So they could actually be very scared, shut down this research, shut down these labs and say never again. Now that could be a scenario. The other scenario could be that somebody in Beijing is sitting in a cabinet room and going, all right, this is what went wrong this time. So now we need to ensure that next time around, it doesn't look bad on us, it starts elsewhere, we can make it even more virulent, and it affects us less because we have a vaccine in advance and the rest of the world doesn't. Which of the two scenarios is the more likely one, sir?
I'd say the second, the world being a very cynical place. But let's also understand they're not the only ones holding viruses. America holds a ton of them. I'm not sure if India does, but many other countries do. So this can go both ways. And in a globalized world, You try and aim it at a particular country, but people are traveling. If you like, this is how it spread from Wuhan, even if it was unintentional, because they let millions of people go abroad from Wuhan as much as possible for 6 months before any restrictions were laid at all. So, if you indulge in biological warfare, it will be found out. Intelligence will arrive at whatever it is. And even if it is unproven, it can be retaliated against.
Okay, so it is.
The
It is
last
either.
point is, and
Yes,
with all the
finish your thought.
doctors here, they will agree with me, is that it keeps mutating. Look at how many variations have come out of the COVID vaccine virus.
So, like some cheesy James Bond movie plot, right? And this has been one of the plots of James Bond movies, that you have a insane person holding the world at ransom with a loathsome disease, but that person also holds the cure for that loathsome disease. Now, we have to now draw the assumption that two things can play out, that we will never be told the truth by the Chinese. Either they can be internally aghast and disturbed and actually now deeply careful about any future research they do, or they could be sitting and figuring out how they can be more devastating the next time around. I'll leave it to your assumption on what you think is happening, because no one out there seems to be able to tell us the truth. It is unbelievable. Near 7 million people are dead and counting, and we don't know what happened.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.